Let's continue with the ceiling. So I'm going to select the ceiling as an object. You can see I have it. And I'm going to go into Material Editor. And here's the ceiling texture that we currently have. It's already made. Just double check. I'm just going to switch the color out. Yep, okay. So you can see I have it in real time. And what we want to do is we're not going to use the diffuse on this. We're actually going to use a bump map and create a tin ceiling. So I'm going to start with the bump, increase it to 100. I'm going to choose a map down the map section. Fit map, okay, and let's go to the folder. Let me see, let's go a minute. Sorry about this. There we go. And there's the tin ceiling. Now this isn't a perfect texture, but for what we're doing, it should be fine. Okay, so I have this mapped and set up. Now I don't see it on the ceiling. If I toggle this icon with this map loaded, and the other times I did it on the top, and I'll just do diffuse. If I do this, I'll see this. So when I render this, be aware that it's just going to be, it looks like it's embossed, but it's basically it's creating the bump map even though you're visually seeing a texture. So the first thing we notice is the size is way too big. So tiling is the number of times that a texture is repeated. And if I knock this down to 5 by 5 and I go render out, you can see that it's a little smaller and it works a little bit better. Now the tile, the way that it works, if we view this image and open it up, anything that's white comes up, anything that's black goes back. So the problem is the border around the ceiling tile will actually punch forward, and we actually want it to go back. So what I can do with that is actually go down to this texture and open up output, and I can invert it, and now when I render it, it will push the opposite way. So it's something you can kind of play around with pretty quickly, get some different results with. Now I have this set just as a standard. If we wanted to do more with it, we can make it reflective, make it look like metal. I think gives this just diffuse, it maybe gives it, looks a little bit like it's almost a copper. Stop orange, knock the value down, pull this there. Okay, so we've got copy color. And then for the specular, we're just going to bring in the map that we're currently using. So if I collapse all this, and we go right there's the bump, okay. And I don't know if I'm going to need to invert it or not, so I'm going to use a copy. And go back to ceiling. And actually I want to put it in this one. Swap. Okay, because we actually want to use it to where it's the glossiness is. And then we'll crank up the specular level. And at this point I'm seeing that it's actually opposite of what I want. So I'll go in and go down and grab and output and invert it. The invert off. Now you can see it's more isolated where it's shiny, so let's render it out. You can see you have some highlights here and there. We can also play around with turning it on and off, but that's just kind of give you some basics of how to get this to work. Let's knock that down a little. Let's see if we can just clear this out and see if we get, it's more of a sheen. And you can see now that's a slightly different feel and look. So spend a lot of time playing around, but just to show you some more basic concepts. Now we're going to make some wallpaper, and the ceiling tile was helpful because it was a pre-made shape and we could repeat it and we knew it would align. And this is called a seamless texture. Now you don't always get those. These wood maps that we used wouldn't necessarily properly line up and work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to Photoshop, and you can also use GIMP, which is a free open source photo editing program as well. If you don't have Photoshop, there's nothing special that Photoshop enables you to do with this, but you need a filter called offset. So if I go filter, other, offset, and I just change this around, and I'll zoom in so hopefully you can see this. So we'll do, actually no, let's increase this to negative 300, and 200, and negative 200, and hit OK. And if we zoom in and we go to look at this, you'll see that the tiling is off. So what we need to do is we need to figure out a way to get this so that the tiling actually will work. I have rulers up, and if you don't have rulers, you can just pull them up, and the only reason I use those is I can get guides. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to pull, and I'm going to get this lined up exactly on that flower. You could also choose another area, and then I want to find the flower there because that's where I want it to repeat. And then I can use the flower as a reference again right here and get it centered. And then we can come down and grab the flower right here. Now if I go do a crop, stop snapping on so it automatically goes and it snaps. Under view you can turn on snap. And check and OK, and now I've recropped this. Now to check it out, if I go and I will just simply go in and say define pattern under edit, and I can just use the default, that's fine. Now I'm going to create a new scene, and I actually want to make it, this should be good size, 224, relatively big. And then I'll do edit fill, and I will choose the pattern we just made. So we'll go to the drop down list and grab it right there. Okay, and now you can see, we can actually see what it's going to look like when it repeats. And you can see it's a little off, but for the most part it's not the end of the world, but we could go back and tweak it and change it. But you can see how we used that technique to basically create the look and get it to actually work in tile. And then the other thing we can do at this point would be to make the size so it's consistent. So if I wanted to image size, right now it's 198 by 194. If I turn off constraint proportion, I can change this so it's, let's just do 56. Oh, let's do 128. And okay, and now we've created a square texture. In some programs this will map easier, so it's kind of up to you. We can leave it as is, but just to be aware of that, sometimes that's a requirement for some programs. So we'll save this as wallpaper seamless, we know it'll map, and hit OK. And just briefly, I'm going to open up the Teak. And let's just look at this and see what happens if I use the offset. Just as different ways to kind of be aware of this. I hit the offset, so you see there's a really strong seam, so you'd have to manually come in and figure out how to blend that and clean that up so that you wouldn't see that line when you did it. So with the wood texture, I'm kind of limited by the size. If I want to create one, and you can go online and you can create them as well, and I can give you more information should you need it. So we have that set, so we'll go back to the wall, and we'll do diffuse, and we will come in and grab a new bitmap. And this will be the wallpaper that we created. Okay. And then toggle on the show material, and you can see that that's way too big. So let's try something like 10 by 10. And you can see we're starting to get something that's a little bit more. I can push in different ways and work with it. Let's just render this out. We'll see, we got our ceiling, and then we got our wallpaper. So that's pretty easy. We got everything added, and at this point, the only thing I want to play around with are the manuscript. And what we're going to do is something slightly different with this. So I'm going to go over and get out of camera and go to perspective so you can actually see what we're looking at and working here. I can always go back because I haven't set the camera. Is we want to assign a texture to these sheets. So they all have a material on them already. With the paper for the parchments, there's the paper. And on the diffuse channel, I'm going to load up the bitmap. And this is the last one's in the folder. This is Wallwoman's Notebook. And I'm going to hit this so you can see it, and you can see now we have the whole page. Now the thing with that that's off is it basically we only want to isolate one half of the page as opposed to both. So the way that I'm going to go about doing this is I'm going to add a modifier to change the way that the geometry is drawn on this. Now right now there's an HSDS, which is basically, you can see what it does, it subdivides the geometry. And what we want to do is we want to add a UVW. Now a map determines how it's projected, and I showed you that briefly. The unwrap, actually we'll look at this next class when we the ball animation as well. But we're going to use unwrap. And what I want to do is I want to switch these so that the unwrap modifier gets assigned before the HSDS. And I'm actually just going to turn that off for the time being so we can see this original shape. And you can see once I added that there's a green outline. So we want to go in and we want to open the UV editor. And now we have different controls that we can use for actually changing the way that the texture is positioned. And actually it's a little tricky to get the setup perfect here. So let me just pull up, there you go, so you can at least see a little bit of what's happening. So first thing to do is to pull up the image. And you can see here are the vertices. If I turn on edge face, you can see there are the lines and the vertices of the object. And a couple things we want to do, now this is in vertex mode, which is completely fine for this. So we want to select all of these, and we have scale option, and we can scale in one direction. So we're going to scale, and we're going to make this skinny, and I'm going to do this and grab it. Okay, and I'm going to grab the move tool, and I'm going to take everything, and now you see that I have the same width as the page. Change the scale for the top, and bring that down, and I'm going to make it the height of either the top or the bottom, because we're going to do a little alterations here. So now that I have that roughly lined up, obviously you can do a lot of tweaking with this, is I'm going to select this, actually I'll just select all of these, and I'll pull that down, and then I'll select all of these, and pull that down, and try to get it as straight as I can, and as even as I can, and do that, and then finally come down and change this. And if I go and there we go, and if we do it, you can see now it doesn't look like this, it looks like this one because I've done the mapping. And now if I close this out and turn off the selection mode and turn HSDS back on and render this out, you can now see that I have this texture paper that shows the manuscript and the writing, and I just need to do the same thing with the other two pieces or just recopy them. So that's the basic settings for that. And that's pretty well finishes up what we were, the basic techniques as far as creating mapping and applying it. So just to review, we did a procedural on here with the checker. We also did a procedural on the glass, which are basically mathematically generated. Then we brought in a bitmap picture and assigned it to the mirror. We brought in a non-seamless, not repeating wood texture and turned off specularity to create this wood that looks like an unfinished walnut. We brought in another image here and assigned it to a ray trace material to make it look like it was shiny and had a finish. We brought in and created a tin or copper ceiling, and then we created a repeatable seamless texture of the wallpaper and brought that in. And then finally we did the paper on the pages. So that's it. The two things I want to mention is when you submit these, one thing you want to be aware of, and I'll just show you the file, just to remind you of the file that we actually used for this assignment. There's actually a folder called textures. You need to submit textures with your model. Textures are not saved inside the max file, and so the easiest thing is just to put them in the same folder in the same area. What will happen is when you open this up, it'll automatically look in this folder and any subfolders to see where the textures is. If they're not there, open it up. It'll And if you're not quite sure if it's happening or not, you can actually just take this file and place it somewhere else and go to open it, and you'll get a prompt that says, hey, where are all these textures? I can't find them. And then when you install Max, you get prompted to include some other items. And if we go into just shared, okay, so this is, I have a 64-bit, so this is a 32-bit build. So I go into C, Program Files, Common Files, Autodesk Shared, Materials, and if we go into Textures, and here's different collections of materials, and you can see here's a whole bunch of different architectural seamless materials. They have some wood, but generally most of it looks like Formica or something a little cheap and cheesy. But you can see that there's some different ones. For example, this one's actually not bad, but some of these they're pretty painful if you try to look at it and you see. They're not bad, but I'd recommend maybe going online or actually scanning some photographs, some real pieces of wood to create something. Okay, so that's it.